Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I was Nestor's wife in my previous life, and he despised me for half of it. He hated me for using a pregnancy to force him into marriage, resenting me for making him lose his first love, and trapping him in a small town as a minor businessman living an unremarkable life. I hated him for spending his days drinking, gambling, and indulging in affairs, ignoring everything at home and allowing his ungrateful family to bully me. Then an accident happened and we were both reborn, carrying our mutual resentment. At the graduation ceremony, our gazes met briefly, cutting through the crowd before we each turned away, heading firmly toward the futures we had chosen. This time, I hope neither of us will regret it. Chapter 1. The day I decided to stay in the city for work, my mom held my face and smothered me with kisses, overjoyed. "My good daughter, you'll thank yourself for making this choice in a few years. And stop being a little shadow following Nestor around. Take it from me, your mom. He's no good." After finishing her scolding, she walked into the living room and shouted toward the kitchen where my dad was. "Let's add braised fish to tonight's menu. Start cutting up the chili peppers and ginger. I'll run down to the market to get the fish." Bang! The door closed behind her, and my dad poked his head out of the kitchen. Holding a spatula in one hand, he looked every bit like a man who belonged in the kitchen. "You finally listened to us, huh? Ha ha." Seeing the warm, silly smile on his face, I couldn't hold back the lump in my throat, and tears welled up in my eyes. In my previous life, I didn't listen to them. I insisted on rushing to save Nestor, who was being cornered by a gang of thugs. My dad couldn't stop worrying, so he secretly followed me. I shielded Nestor with my body as he was trapped against the wall of the alley, but the expected blows never landed on me. When I turned around, I saw that my dad had taken the hit instead. A wooden club struck his head hard, and blood immediately streamed down. At the hospital, he couldn't be saved. My mom, who had heart disease, passed away the next day from grief. The memory of it made my tears fall uncontrollably. I told myself, "Monica, this time you have to do better." Without hesitation, I dialed the HR manager's number. "Sir, I've made up my mind. I'm ready to start work anytime." Chapter 2. In my previous life, due to my outstanding performance during the internship, I received an offer from a publicly listed company before graduation. The pay and benefits were exceptional. My childhood friend Nestor faced immediate unemployment after graduating. Later, he told me he planned to return to his hometown to inherit the family construction business, and asked me to give up my 20,000 prompt job to follow him. Love can truly turn a woman into a fool. I actually gave up a promising future and followed him back to his hometown. The day I rejected the company's offer, Nestor told me that night that he had changed his mind. He wasn't returning home. He wanted to stay in the city. He talked about how the city was full of opportunities and that he could borrow money from his father to start a construction business there. He was too naive. The city's projects were far more complicated than those in the county. In this society, without connections, you'd get nowhere. That night, his parents came to me begging me to convince him to change his mind. So I went. And that's when I saw him being shoved into an alley by gangsters. Because of that night, I lost my parents. My father followed me because he was worried. I used my body to shield Nestor, but those gangsters didn't swing their bats at me, they hit my father. A bat struck his head and blood gushed out. He didn't survive the trip to the hospital. My mother, who had a heart condition, passed away the next day out of grief and shock. Nestor's parents were overwhelmed with guilt. When Nestor recovered from his injuries and learned that my entire family had been destroyed because of him, he felt responsible. To make up for it, he proposed marriage. The night before our wedding, he suddenly had second thoughts and tried to back out. But under pressure and emotional manipulation from his parents, he went through with it. By then, I had no one left except him. I devoted myself fully to him, not noticing how distant he had become. 2 months after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Nestor wasn't ready to be a father. He felt overwhelmed. But I knew the truth. It wasn't about pressure. He simply wasn't done playing around and wasn't ready to settle down. I made an appointment to get an abortion. But my mother-in-law showed up in time to stop me. "Daughter-in-law, I watched you grow up. Nestor might be a fool, but you can't act foolish too. "You can't abort this child. It's our family's first grandchild." Tears of gratitude streamed down my face, but I ignored the hint of malice flickering in her eyes. So I stayed home and prepared for childbirth. The months flew by, and before I knew it, I was cradling a set of twins, a boy and a girl. Afterward, I was immediately thrown into postpartum recovery and breastfeeding routines. I did everything myself, no help, no delegation. Every big and small task rested on my shoulders. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. My twins had learned to walk and were starting to speak in broken phrases. During those 3 years of motherhood, I learned a harsh truth. My in-laws, despite their sweet words, did far less for me than my parents ever had. No matter what I bought, food, clothing, or supplies, my in-laws would always have something snarky to say. So I decided to regain my independence and told Nestor that I wanted to return to work. He agreed. I eagerly sent out resumes, and just as I was about to accept my second job offer, my in-laws both conveniently fell ill and were hospitalized. Nestor told me that as a mother, I should be more understanding. He expected me to stay home to take care of the children and his parents. "Let me handle the money," he said confidently. I was furious, but to save his dignity, I didn't reveal the truth, that his so-called success as a project manager was a facade. Every month, he needed money from his parents to maintain that image. And since most of their funds were tied up in construction projects, there wasn't much cash to go around. So I wrote articles and submitted them to publishers in the moments I could steal between taking care of the elderly and the kids. The small but steady stream of income helped me barely keep our family afloat. But Nestor's spending was astronomical. He constantly told me, "Just a little longer. The project funds will be released soon." Then he'd ask me for more money, acting as if it was only right for me to provide it. When I refused, he'd get angry, sometimes hitting me, yelling that if I didn't help him, everything he had invested would be wasted. If the family collapsed, I wouldn't be spared from the fallout either. In the end, I had no choice but to sell the only apartment my parents had left me. That money went straight into the bottomless pit that was Nestor's family. Thankfully, my writing income continued to grow, and I barely managed to raise my kids. The financial pressure at home was like a giant mountain suffocating me. Nestor squandered my hard-earned royalties, all while belittling my work. "At your age, you're still writing that trashy low-class fiction." Angry, I retorted. "If you despise it so much, then don't use the money. Earn it yourself." Embarrassed and furious, he beat me again. In the dead of night, I would curl up in the corner of the room, crying in silence like a pathetic clown hiding in the shadows. Nestor and I had grown up together, childhood sweethearts who were supposed to be inseparable. How had life turned out like this? I couldn't understand it. In my novels, marriage was never the graveyard of love. I told my readers to chase the light and rise above life's challenges. But in reality, my love for Nestor had long evaporated, lost to the burdens of family, children, in-laws, and the daily grind. If not for my kids, I would have given up a long time ago. After one particularly violent argument, Nestor rarely came home anymore. Whenever he did, he reeked of alcohol. Drunk and stumbling, he would come into the room with a whip in hand and beat me in front of the children. Only when I shakily opened my phone to transfer him money did he stop. Despite all this, the twins, my only source of emotional comfort, showed no affection for me. In fact, their eyes carried faint traces of resentment whenever they looked at me. When they were about to start middle school and were just 1 point short of being admitted to the top high school, I humiliated myself begging their teachers and even kneeling before the principal. Finally, they agreed. I was overjoyed, slicing fruit for the twins at home, only for them to glare at me with even greater disdain. "Mom, you've already controlled Dad's life. Now you want to control ours too?" my daughter snapped. My son chimed in. "Exactly. What's so great about a top high school? Good grades don't guarantee a better life. We'll still end up being slaves to others. And if you hadn't forced Dad into marrying you using Grandpa and Grandma's deaths, would our family be this miserable?" At that moment, my heart shattered into pieces. I had spent my entire life sacrificing for them. Yet instead of gratitude, all they had for me was resentment. I left home dazed and broken, forgetting to even drop the fruit knife I had in my hand. When I reached the underground parking lot, I saw Nestor's black BMW rocking back and forth in the distance. Frowning, I walked closer. Suddenly, a woman's hand slapped against the foggy window, leaving smudged prints on the glass. There was a woman inside Nestor's car. The answer was obvious. Soon, the rocking stopped, and a satisfied Nestor lay in the back seat with a disheveled woman in his arms. "When are you divorcing your wife?" the woman asked. Nestor chuckled. "What's the rush? Why get rid of a free maid?" The woman giggled. "You've got a point. You didn't even give her a dowry when you married, right? Just a simple marriage certificate, no gold jewelry or a proper wedding. And after all these years she's raised your kids, taken care of your parents, and still brings in money for us to spend." Nestor burst out laughing. "Then let's hold off on the divorce. We might as well keep living off her." I opened the car door, smiling coldly. "What do you think? Is this fruit knife sharp enough?" Their faces turned ashen with terror. I stabbed them both 19 times each, making 38 stabs in total. "Next time, try being decent human beings." After killing them, I climbed into the driver's seat, locked the car doors, and turned on the air conditioning. I fell asleep peacefully without any pain. In my next life, may I never encounter Nestor again. But if I do, I swear I'll kill him all over again. Chapter 3. Monica. "Monica, come eat some fish. What are you daydreaming about?" Mom's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I sniffled. "It smells so good, Mom." "Dad, I just had a really long dream." I shared the story of my previous life with them, disguising it as a fictional tale. After all, in my past life, I was nothing more than a struggling author ranked in the bottom tiers. Once I finished my story, they both fell into silence, clearly immersed in the narrative. "Monica," Mom said as she placed a piece of fish into my bowl. "As soon as we finish eating, we're moving, our whole family. We'll go live in the city where you're working." I was stunned. "Move? What about the house?" Dad lit a cigarette as if he'd just made a firm decision. "It's strange. This scene feels like something I dreamt about 4 or 5 years ago. Let's sell the house. We'll start fresh in the city, and we won't be neighbors with Nestor's family anymore. They're too good at freeloading." With the head of the household making the call, I, the daughter, naturally had no objections. My parents were the action-oriented type. That very afternoon, we packed our belongings, got into Dad's car, and headed for my new city. One of Dad's close friends had already pulled some strings to help him rent a budget-friendly apartment. Just as we were about to leave, we bumped into Nestor's family returning home. "Oh my, you're moving out. Where are you going?" Nestor's mom approached us, her brow slightly furrowed. "Monica, aren't you worried another woman might steal my son while you're gone? He's very popular at school, you know." Nestor's father joined the conversation with a cheerful grin. "Monica, I heard your internship performance was so good that the company hired you before graduation. That's great. You've got a job lined up, unlike my son, who has to come back and inherit the family business." Haha. Though his words seemed to pity his son's situation, his tone and expression screamed something else entirely. "Your good grades don't matter. You'll still end up working like a servant for people like us. Dad, Mom, don't worry about her. She can go wherever she wants. It has nothing to do with us," Nestor said as he walked up. I looked up and caught his gaze. In that single glance, I knew without a doubt, he had been reborn too. Without hesitation, I turned and got into Dad's car. This time around, I was going to live my life for me. As for Nestor, he could do whatever he wanted. What did it have to do with me? Chapter 4. As the day Nestor would give up on graduate school and return home to inherit the family business approached, I gradually adjusted to the pace of my new job. That Friday after work, I unexpectedly ran into Nestor's mom, Sandra. She handed me a bottle of water, smiling. "Heading home, dear?" I frowned. Why had she chased me all the way from our hometown to here? "Is something wrong, Aunt Sandra?" Sandra hesitated, then nodded awkwardly. "Nestor doesn't plan to continue his graduate studies. He wants to return home and work under his father in the construction business." I lowered my gaze, pretending to remain indifferent. "That sounds good. There's money to be made in construction." Money, huh? Sure, it had been lucrative for the past few years, but I knew that in the years ahead it would be a downhill battle. Sandra shook her head. "Good? What's good about it? Nothing's easy these days. I want him to continue with his graduate studies. Could you talk to him?" He listens to you more than anyone else. Listens to me? I chuckled to myself. This woman was such an actress. In my past life, I had naively believed that Aunt Sandra genuinely cared for me. It wasn't until later that I realized the truth. She'd had her eye on our family home from the start. That's why, after my parents passed away, she forced Nestor to marry me. Back then I didn't know how cunning she was. I treated her like my own mother, even taking care of her when she faked being sick and was hospitalized. Aunt Sandra, whether Nestor pursues his graduate studies or not is his decision. I can't change his mind. I've already talked to him about it before. I told him if he didn't find a good job, he should continue studying. He's heard my advice plenty of times. I was telling the truth and subtly rejecting her suggestion. Sandra smiled and stroked my hair as if I were still that naive girl. Sweetheart, if you don't go back, what if Nestor starts dating another girl? Why don't you give me the keys to your house? I can help you clean it once in a while. Then when you're on vacation, you can come back and stay there. I know you've liked Nestor since you were little, and I've always thought of you as my future daughter-in-law, so… No, Aunt Sandra. Before she could finish her sentence, I cut her off. Nestor has his own life and his own choices. I'm not going to interfere. That's it. I have something important tonight, so I won't see you out. Goodbye, Aunt Sandra. Without giving her a chance to respond, I turned around and left. I hoped I'd never have to see her again. She made me sick. Even knowing that I had chosen to build a future in the city, and that there was no future between Nestor and me, she still had the nerve to target our family home. Disgusting. I didn't look back. As soon as I got back to my apartment, I called my parents to tell them what had happened. Dad immediately decided to sell the house as soon as possible. But since he had just started a new job and couldn't leave, and he didn't feel comfortable letting Mom handle it alone, he handed the property deed over to me and gave me full authority to deal with it. The day I returned to our hometown, Aunt Sandra caught wind of it and came knocking on my door. Her eyes were red from crying, but beneath her tears was a hatred so tangible it felt like it could pierce through me. Chapter 5. Monica, why aren't you coming back to convince my son? Sandra suddenly raised her voice, making me jump. It was the first time I had seen her so out of control. I figured it was because in the past I'd never dared to disobey her face to face, desperate as I was to marry into their family. Now that I had come back with such a cold, indifferent attitude, she couldn't handle the contrast. Your son's decisions have nothing to do with me, I said. Sandra glared at me furiously. If my son doesn't land a good job in the future, I won't let you live peacefully. I frowned. How could she be so unreasonable? Whether Nestor had a job or not, or how good it was entirely his choice. I had already helped plan his path. If he refused to follow it, how was that my fault? As I stood in silence, the real estate agent arrived with a potential buyer. Which one of you is Monica? The agent asked. That's me, I said, raising my hand. Come in. I led the agent and the buyer inside, giving them a detailed tour of the house, including information about the living environment and nearby amenities. The buyer was a young civil servant who had recently passed his exams and been assigned to this small county. His family had pooled their money together to help him buy a home, knowing he'd likely be living here for the rest of his life. The moment he stepped inside, he seemed to fall in love with the cozy layout of the house and immediately asked how much I wanted for it. Since he was a first-time buyer and I was eager to sell quickly, we settled on a price in no time. Sandra, who had been standing off to the side watching the whole exchange as if it were some kind of show, was left dumbfounded. Seeing me about to sign the paperwork, she rushed over and tried to stop me. You're really going to sell the house? Houses go up in value. What if you want to come back in the future? Are you really giving up on being my daughter-in-law? Her intentions were obvious. She thought I had stopped contacting Nestor because we were having a spat and playing the silent treatment game. She believed that selling the house was just a bluff to get Nestor to come back to me. But she couldn't have been more wrong. Her mistake was in misunderstanding the very foundation of the situation. The truth was, after being reborn, all I wanted was to stay as far away from their family as possible. The sooner the better. Without hesitation, I signed the contract. That evening, I stood in the old house where I had spent most of my life, feeling a hint of nostalgia tugging at my heart. Tomorrow, I would go to the government office to complete the property transfer, collect the payment, and finally be done with the house. Chapter 6. Even though Sandra tried to interfere with the sale of the house, all she could really do was threaten me. I didn't care about anything besides my parents, so she no longer had the leverage over me she once had in my past life. One day, my boss called me into the office and told me that I could be promoted early and become a full-time employee with a monthly salary of 20,000 yuan. I was overjoyed and rushed home to share the good news with my parents. My amazing daughter is unstoppable. Dad laughed, beaming with pride. Mom was equally happy, and her sentimental side got the better of her as she shed a few tears. Our daughter has truly made us proud. Who said education is useless? But life always has a way of throwing curveballs. In the second month of my job, the company assigned me to negotiate a contract with a client. As soon as I entered the meeting, my heart skipped a beat. I saw Nestor. He was the client. Standing beside him was a woman. I squinted to get a better look and immediately recognized her. She was the same woman from my past life, the one I had killed in Nestor's BMW. Haha, Nestor chuckled. If it weren't for you letting me go, I wouldn't have met the love of my life so soon. As he spoke, he wrapped an arm around the woman's waist and pulled her close. I said nothing. No wonder I hadn't heard anything about Nestor recently. Everything suddenly made sense. He had been reborn too, and like me, he was using the knowledge from our past life to get ahead in his career. The woman beside him was no ordinary person. Predictably, the contract negotiations failed. My boss was furious because Nestor was a crucial client. I assumed that once the negotiations ended, the company would assign a new person to take over. They did, but not in the way I expected. I was fired. I didn't need to think too hard to figure out that Nestor was the one pulling strings behind the scenes. I hadn't expected that even after being reborn, he would still find ways to mess with me and get his petty revenge. All I ever wanted was to live my life in peace and never see him again. But apparently he had other plans. However, he was abusing his power for personal vendettas, and I was no longer the person who would just sit back and let myself be trampled on. I didn't tell my parents I had lost my job. Instead, I packed my laptop every morning and left the house as if I were heading to work. I'd spend the day at a nearby cafe, writing as if my life depended on it. My head was overflowing with ideas. I knew exactly what readers wanted during different time periods, what genres and what storylines would capture their attention. I juggled writing both male and female targeted novels, working on 3 or 4 stories simultaneously. 6 months later, my income from writing had multiplied several dozen times compared to my past life. But I wasn't delusional. I knew this success wasn't purely due to my hard work. I was simply capitalizing on the advantage of having memories from 2 lifetimes. So I took the money I had earned and invested it in Bitcoin, which was just starting to gain traction. At that time, Bitcoin was incredibly cheap. In a few years, the value of Bitcoin would increase exponentially. After investing in it, I still had 200,000 yuan left in my hands. I used the money to rent an office suite in a nearby building and started my own media company. The company was small. My plan was to hire 10 writers, provide them with ideas, and take on the role of the dreaded capitalist. Because if I didn't do it, someone else would. It was all about survival. But of course, I wasn't completely heartless. I was a kind and generous boss who treated my employees well. One day, after finishing my work, I leaned back in my chair to rest for a bit. Just as I was about to doze off, I saw someone had tagged me on social media. Curious, I opened the notification, and it turned out to be from Nestor. I was stunned. Nestor never posted on social media, so much so that I had almost forgotten about him. The post was a collage of 9 photos, wedding photos of him and his fiancée. They looked so happy, so perfect, so blissful. Sandra was still in my contacts, so I scrolled down to see her comment. Congratulations to my son and Zoe for finding their happily ever after. Wishing you a long and prosperous life together and many children soon. She even tagged me in the comment. I couldn't help but chuckle. That old woman still hadn't moved on from the past, had she? I put down my phone, unwilling to waste another second thinking about them. Later that evening, when I returned home, I noticed the tense atmosphere hanging in the air. My parents sat at the dinner table, their faces clouded with concern. What's wrong? I asked while picking up a piece of meat and popping it into my mouth. Mom looked at me with worry in her eyes but hesitated to speak. Bang! Dad, however, couldn't hold it in any longer. Monica, how much longer were you planning to hide this from us? Dad rarely lost his temper. Mom usually took charge of all household matters while he stayed quietly in the background as a supportive homemaker. This was the first time I had ever seen him get this angry. At that moment, I realized they had found out everything. Did Nestor tell you? I asked, frowning at Dad. Dad took a deep breath and didn't respond. Mom, her face full of sorrow, answered instead. It was Sandra. She told us yesterday at Nestor's engagement party, when we went to give them the wedding gift. Dad shook his head and looked me in the eye. What have you been doing all this time? How could you keep something this big from us? I continued eating calmly, then pulled out my phone and showed them my bank balance. Seeing the six-figure balance, my parents exchanged astonished glances, their faces full of disbelief. I put down my chopsticks and smiled. Mom, Dad, I started my own company and made a little money. You know that job with the 20,000 yuan salary? Well, my company now earns at least 50,000 a month. Dad's eyes widened in shock. Mom, however, smacked him on the arm. Look at you, yelling at our daughter like that when she's the one making something of herself. Your punishment? Go make another dish. Hearing that, Dad lowered his head and slinked off to the kitchen, defeated. I couldn't help but laugh. Dad, there's no need. The table is already full of food. From now on, you two don't need to worry about me. I can take care of myself. You're both nearing retirement, right? Once you're free, we can go on a family vacation together. Yes, that sounds perfect. With the weight off their shoulders, my parents visibly relaxed, and the conversation quickly shifted to gossip about Nestor's engagement party. Monica, I have some juicy gossip for you. Do you want to hear it? Mom looked at me with a mischievous grin, her excitement barely contained. Dad sat quietly, pretending to mind his own business, but his ears were perked up. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of juicy gossip, Mom? What's got you acting all mysterious? Mom tied her hair back, leaning in like she was about to deliver a scandalous revelation. Of course, it's about your childhood sweetheart, Nestor. The moment she mentioned Nestor, her entire demeanor changed, and she suddenly resembled one of those nosy aunties from short videos who lived for gossip. It was like she had an endless supply of energy. You have no idea. She talked for a full 30 minutes before I finally pieced together the story about Nestor. Turns out, after ignoring my advice to pursue graduate school, he immediately returned to his hometown and went straight to Zoe. Zoe's father was also in the construction business, but he was more successful and influential than Nestor's dad. And just like that, Zoe and Nestor ended up with an unplanned pregnancy. Soon after, they got engaged. So far, it all seemed pretty normal, until Nestor reverted to his old habits from our previous life. Drinking, gambling, and frequenting sketchy places eventually caught the attention of his soon-to-be father-in-law. Zoe's father scolded him, and even considered canceling the engagement. But Zoe insisted on marrying him, so her parents reluctantly agreed. Then, when Zoe was 3 months pregnant and already showing, they hastily arranged the wedding. But on the night before the wedding, things went south. Zoe's father was at a club when he accidentally walked in on his future son-in-law, Nestor, hiring an escort. To make things worse, they both had the unfortunate luck of choosing the same girl. The situation spiraled out of control. When Zoe's father saw firsthand how unrepentant Nestor was, he immediately called off the wedding. But somehow, the wedding still proceeded as planned the next day. When Mom reached this part of the story, she shook her head in frustration. I thought the marriage would be over after that fiasco. I can't understand why Zoe's family would still go through with it. What are they thinking, marrying off their daughter to a man like Nestor? Thank goodness my smart daughter didn't end up with him. Otherwise, our family would have been dragged into chaos. I stayed quiet. My parents didn't know the full story, but I could already guess the rest. In my previous life, I knew Zoe well. She and Nestor were often seen together in public, flaunting their relationship. Nestor had once confessed to me that Zoe's dad was involved in some shady dealings. Nestor must have taken advantage of this knowledge in this life and blackmailed them into agreeing to the marriage. There was no other way Zoe's parents would have willingly handed over their daughter to a man with such a terrible reputation. Some things never change, I muttered to myself. Even with a second chance at life, Nestor was still the same scumbag. But this gossip gave me an idea. Nestor had gone out of his way to make my life miserable and even cost me my job. It was time for me to return the favor. Chapter 7. I paid someone to file a formal report against Nestor for illegal activities, providing them with all the details of the violations he had committed. It didn't even take a week before Nestor and his father-in-law were arrested and brought in for investigation. Zoe was so terrified that she ended up miscarrying her baby. That was an unexpected bonus. In our previous life, didn't you enjoy seducing my husband and destroying my family? This time, Zoe, I'm letting you taste the same misery. I didn't bother to find out what happened to everyone else. All I knew was that Nestor was sentenced to 3 years in prison. During those 3 years, my media company gradually gained stability. Though it was small, our services covered a wide range of content. Our monthly profits were steady and consistent. And then Bitcoin's price skyrocketed through several surges. The coins I had bought for just a few thousand suddenly soared to over 300,000. I knew the price would continue to rise, but I also understood that ill-gotten gains shouldn't be hoarded excessively. So when the price hit 400,000, I sold everything. Just like that, my net worth shot past 10 million. Chapter 8. While shopping with my best friend, I unexpectedly ran into Nestor. He was carrying a water barrel, wearing a water delivery uniform, delivering water to a clothing store. Indeed, it seemed like fate was playing tricks on me for us to meet like this. He saw me too. You. Before he could say more, I grabbed my friend's arm and headed toward another store. My best friend looked curious. Do you know him? You didn't look too comfortable just now. I smiled and shook my head. Not really, just an old neighbor from the same alley. How could I not know him? The grudges and tangled past from my previous life were real. But so was the love I once had for him. Of course, I emphasize once. Now I have no feelings for him at all. I can deny him, but I can't deny the emotions I once had. Otherwise, wouldn't that be the same as denying myself? The light we chase in our youth often fades, leaving us no choice but to stop and choose another path. I lost the mood to continue shopping with my friend and sent her off with a few quick words before strolling down the street alone. Amid the crowd, a pair of gray sneakers appeared in my line of sight. I looked up and met Nestor's cold, resentful gaze. You're the one who framed me and got me sent to jail, aren't you? I feigned ignorance and silently stared at him. Don't act clueless. The guy you paid to report me confessed everything after I gave him a good beating. I stayed quiet, but in my heart I thought, even if you know I was behind it, what can you do? The fact that you committed the crime is solid as steel. It doesn't matter who reported you. Nestor suddenly smirked. I guess you haven't gotten over me, huh? I was filled with confusion and disgust. He leaned in closer, confident now. That's the only explanation, right? Why else would you destroy me? You just wanted to make me lose everything so I'd come crawling back to you, didn't you? It's been so many years, no 2 lifetimes now, and you still can't let go of me. The more I listened, the more nauseated I felt. Gross beyond words. You're way too full of yourself. Also, get out of my way. I pushed him aside and kept walking forward. He rushed up again and blocked me. Stop pretending, Monica. If you didn't love me, you would have already been dating someone else. After I got out of prison, I asked around about you. You've been single all this time and haven't dated even once. He grabbed my sleeve, his expression dead serious. Honey, don't you remember? We had a lovely pair of twins. The 4 of us were so happy together in our past life. Let's do this. I'll give you another chance and we can get back together. Beep beep beep. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed 110. Hello, police? Yes, there's someone harassing me here at XX Street, right in front of the XXX store. Nestor's face changed instantly. You called the cops. I hung up the phone and let out a cold laugh. What's wrong with you? How drunk are you? Weren't 2 rounds of ruining my life enough for you? Now you want a third? Get lost and stop assuming I have any lingering feelings for you. Even if every man on earth were wiped out, I still wouldn't have anything to do with you. Please. Does he even know who he's dealing with? I'm a self-made millionaire, thank you very much. What exactly is going on in his brain? Is it filled with nothing but garbage to say such delusional things with a straight face? Unbelievable. Nestor's eyes widened in disbelief. You just wait. Then he quickly left. He'd just gotten out of prison. If he got caught causing more trouble, The punishment would be harsher than for most people. I snorted and turned away. Call the police? Of course, I didn't actually call them. It was just to scare him off. People like him aren't even worth the effort of reporting. What I didn't expect was that Nestor really meant what he said. He actually went and did something that made me absolutely furious. Chapter 9. With my media company thriving, I was invited to a novel reading convention as a guest speaker. Many of my peers approached me with questions, seeking advice, and I was more than happy to share my experiences. Honestly, I loved being in this kind of environment. Everyone here was involved in the same field, and no matter what we discussed, as soon as I spoke, they would instantly understand the points I wanted to make. Just as I was enjoying the lively conversations, the atmosphere was ruined by none other than Nestor barging in with his mother, Sandra. Nestor shouted loudly, "I'm Monica's husband." This shameless woman used my family's resources to start a media company, made a fortune, and then kicked me to the curb. Don't be fooled by her appearance. Everyone was shocked, and the room filled with the sound of murmuring voices. Some of my peers were visibly uncomfortable. Sandra, being the drama queen she was, started sobbing uncontrollably, tears and snot running down her face as she played the victim. My son was supposed to go to graduate school, but she tricked him into starting a company. Our families had already arranged the wedding, but she backed out and took the money my son gave her to start a company in the city. My son had already established his business and made new friends, but she got jealous and framed him. That's why my poor son went to prison for 3 years. A woman like her doesn't deserve to be in a place like this. Someone here needs to do justice for my family. Sandra's Oscar-worthy performance left some of the onlookers visibly swayed by her tale. I let out a cold laugh. You sure can act, can't you? When was I ever with Nestor? I'm calling the police right now to report your slander. This time I was genuinely furious. I pulled out my phone and began dialing. Sandra's expression changed immediately. She hadn't expected me to fight back. In her mind, I was still the same meek, submissive girl next door. Nestor, on the other hand, remained unfazed. He smiled as he said, "There's a black birthmark right under your spine just above your buttocks, and a butterfly-shaped birthmark on your chest. Am I wrong? You're saying we were never together? Are you sure about that?" My body trembled with rage. In this lifetime we hadn't had any physical contact, but he had memories from our previous life. I had given birth to his children in that life, and he knew every detail of my body better than I did. Leaning closer, Nestor whispered into my ear with a smirk, "You're somewhat famous now. This whole incident will spread like wildfire in your professional circle. Marry me, and your reputation stays intact. Otherwise, your career will be destroyed, and your company will collapse." He gestured to the crowd. Many people had already taken out their phones and were recording everything. He wasn't wrong. This would soon blow up and create a storm that would rage through my industry. But so what? Yes, my media company brought in a stable monthly income of tens of thousands, but my real fortune came from the returns on my Bitcoin investments. Even if the company were to collapse, I would still live comfortably. Thinking of this, I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. "Too bad for you, Nestor, you miscalculated. I will use every legal means available to defend myself. Just wait and see." Chapter 10. After the scandal broke, the negative impact on me was significant. The company, as expected, couldn't continue operating. Since my novels had always followed positive, uplifting themes, but my actions were being labeled as scandalous and negative, it created an irreconcilable conflict. So I stepped down and went behind the scenes. I changed the company's name, handed over leadership to my second-in-command, and worked quietly in the background. Nestor had a twisted mind. He teamed up with Sandra to spread false rumors about me online, even accusing me of cheating during our so-called relationship. His accusations were so detailed and convincing that many people actually believed them. Soon, a wave of online trolls joined in to slander me. I didn't hold back. I hired a legal team and sent out lawyer notices one by one. In this life, many of the events Nestor described never happened. No matter how vivid and detailed his accusations were, the truth would always surface. It wasn't long before Sandra and Nestor were arrested. In their desperation, they started looking for my parents, trying to use our former status as neighbors to gain sympathy and convince my parents to ask me to let them go. But it was all futile. My parents didn't care at all and simply told them, "Whatever our daughter does, we fully support her." As for Nestor, when he was handcuffed again facing the charges, he lost it. He desperately tried to convince the police, shouting, "I'm a reborn man. I know the future trends in the economy and everything that's about to happen. I can tell you how to get rich. Just let me go." But all that awaited him was prison time. When I heard about his outburst, I couldn't help but feel exasperated. He had countless opportunities to use his reborn advantage to get ahead in life, but instead, he devoted all his energy to shady schemes and harmful actions. It perfectly fits the saying, "A dog can't stop itself from eating its own filth." Once locked up, Nestor's head was shaved, and as he stared blankly at his reflection in the prison mirror, tears of regret finally streamed down his face. He regretted it. He wanted another chance. So when the prison guard wasn't paying attention, Nestor smashed his head against the wall, ending his life.